Hello, I'm Dr. Deborah Braboy with Anchored Hope Counseling. Welcome to our YouTube program, Hope Talks. We have some great content provided by our amazing counselors, and we hope that you find it helpful.
Hello, I'm Brad Walker. I'm one of the counselors here at Anchored Hope Counseling, and we're here today with Dr. Deborah Braboy, and we're going to just chat a little bit about sadness, depression, that kind of thing in light of the pandemic that we've been experiencing. So what have you seen out of your clients in regard to sadness, depression, that type of thing since we've been hit with all the new normal?
Right. And I don't even know if we know what the new normal is yet. But yeah, so some of my clients that were already experiencing depression prior to COVID-19 and all of that, their symptoms have worsened. They've deteriorated. So the isolation hasn't helped. They've typically, some of their coping skills would be, getting out, getting around family members, going out to eat or going to catch a movie or things like that. And of course, with the social distancing going on, or maybe their family members haven't decided to kind of get out of the house yet or allow people over. So the isolation has really contributed to the depressive symptoms. But you mentioned too, the depression between sadness and depression. A lot of times people think depression is just simply sadness. But depression is, there's a chemical reaction going on, physiological kind of stuff. It's really complicated for even me to understand, which is why we have Marcia and Kelly to help with medication stuff, our nurse practitioners. But depression, it shows up in a lot of different possible symptoms: loss of interest, maybe moodiness, tearfulness, change in appetite. Some people eat to kind of stuff their feelings, and some people just have a lack of appetite. It changes their sexual desire. It'll change their sleep patterns. So there are all of these different kind of symptoms. Self-esteem is affected. So when we kind of look at depression, we're looking at a lot of different things that encompass it. It's more than just kind of this feeling of sadness. And I think sometimes that kind of gets missed and people kind of generalize like, oh, they're just a little bit sad, but there's definitely a lot more to it. So a lot of times we want to start off without just giving them medication. We want to try to use therapeutic modalities and interventions, help them identify coping skills to address those. But sometimes then we need to resort to medication to help kind of balance out serotonin levels and things like that, to kind of help address that and elevate the mood. But people that I've been working with over the course of this, like I said, that already had depression, like sometimes they're needing to tweak their medication because it may not be addressing, what they're needing right now at the time. Has that been kind of your experience too, or?
Yeah. I think initially, in fact, in some cases, I think we actually saw a little bit of improvement early on, but as it wore on, I would say it didn't necessarily return to the baseline, but actually got worse the longer that it went. But I was curious to ask you about something in regard to sadness, depression. How much of the confusion that we see in our clients do you think is contributed to or added on to by just the general stigma regarding mental health of, oh, that's not what's wrong with you, that kind of thing? What's your experience with that?
Well, I don't think anybody, they don't want to be depressed in the first place, and they don't want to recognize. Sometimes people will come in and I'll say, well, you meet criteria for a diagnosis of depression. And they'll go, really? Like I didn't know I had depression, and so part of it's just a lack of awareness, and they think it's something different than what it is. And then also, we talk about a lot really in the media and TV shows, and they're talking about breaking the stigma and all of that. But I mean, I think it's still there. And people, like I said, they don't want to think that they have depression, so they're just going to kind of deny it, and they're going to think they're just going through a slump or things like that too. There's a lot of talk about breaking the stigma, but I just don't think it's really gone away. I think we can talk about it a little bit more, but it's not a comfortable thing, and it's not anything positive. So people hate to go, yeah, I've been dealing with depression. Right. Because a lot of times people will say, well, isn't everybody? Or everybody has those moments. But that's not really depression, Right. I think social media makes it difficult in this day and age having depression, because you especially if we're isolated, we're on our social media and we're looking, and so-and-so's, going to the beach, or so-and-so's taking a hike, or they're doing fun things, but it just kind of fuels that loneliness, and some of the low self-esteem, kind of really makes you feel more alone. And another thing too, I talk with clients a lot about the difference between feeling alone and loneliness. They're not the same either, just like sadness and depression, they're not the same. So I mean, I think the stigma is still there, because nobody wants to admit that they're feeling depression.
Right.
Yeah,
and I've even had to make a point with clients from time to time of talking about the fact that there is a difference in feeling depressed and having clinical depression.
Sure.
That those are two completely separate items that we all,
right.
Because I think sometimes they don't feel heard or validated when they share what they're going through, because people come back at them with things like, oh, well, everybody feels that way sometimes.
Right.
And so it invalidates what they may be going through, but there are differences in a clinical diagnosis versus a feeling that you may have only for a period of time. So I was going to ask you mentioned earlier a number of things that I think we would do as therapists in suggestions for help with somebody dealing with depression during this quarantine pandemic stuff. What do you do with so many of the things that you would generally offer them to do as a counter to that feeling, and now those are not options because things are closed and we can't go here and we can't do this and we can't do that? What have you been suggesting to your clients to work through that?
Well, for most of them, they do have smartphones, and so I've been encouraging them to just FaceTime with loved ones, connect with other people, spend some time just doing the self-care things that really speak to them, whether it be taking a bubble bath or taking a walk, coloring. Some people enjoy doing that, puzzles, just something that will occupy their time, maybe distract them from thinking about, feeling depressed.
Right.
Because a lot of times your energy level is significantly reduced. So it's like, what can I still do even though I don't feel the motivation or energy to do something? But it's good to just reach out and still connect. And the other thing too is sometimes when you have depression, you mentioned other people may not validate it, and they may in fact invalidate it. So when they call people, they have to pretend that and that takes energy, just have to pretend that everything's really fine. So they would just rather not, and that leads to the isolation. But I try to encourage them to push through that and connect anyway. And what they've really found is just having that connection with a grandchild or a child or a parent or a friend, they usually end up that conversation feeling a little bit better. So I kind of do a scaling question, like kind of check where you're at on a scale of 1 to 10 before you make those calls, and then afterwards, and just see for yourself. Really, I do that with most of the self-help kind of things, so they can kind of have a good idea of what works for them and what doesn't. And pay attention to the time of day too, and look for kind of patterns. Usually with depression, it may be more significant in the morning or more significant in the evening, so kind of pay attention to the pattern for themselves and when they need to implement different things into their schedule to kind of help them balance that. I like that we have nurse practitioners on staff here that help with the medication management.
Absolutely.
Because I think so often they need that to get the mood elevated to be able to do some of the other coping skills.
Any folks that you have that you deal with that not only are you looking at a situation with depression, but maybe there are some other physical health limitations where they're taking medication that might be contributing to the fact that it makes their depression worse? How do you, what do you do with situations like that? Because they're out there.
Oh, they're out there, and I do have a few that I work with that's the situation, and they may not metabolize medications well, and so that contributes to it. They may have some weight issues, they may have physical, chronic, medical conditions. Basically, I do the same thing, and but the main thing is we're created for relationships with people, and a lot of times, especially with this pandemic, we've been so isolated, and that's what I've noticed with my clients, that the symptoms are worsened, but it's primarily due to the lack of connection. So any way that we can kind of encourage that, increase the connection, find ways to even have like driveway parties where I have one client who's doing that right now, and that's helped significantly. And so just find things. You may have to adapt it because of what their other experiences are or conditions, but there's ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, people have come up with some pretty creative ways to to maintain contact and connection. It's been kind of interesting to watch. So. Well, Dr. Braboy, thank you so much for your time here today, and we would like to encourage you guys that we've got a whole series of Hope Talks, so give our YouTube channel a click and check us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Hope Talks. We hope this information was beneficial for you. Please be sure to check out our other videos, and if you would please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we would really appreciate it. Thanks so much and have a blessed day.